Hello and welcome back to Veil Noir. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy drifting into dark, chilling tales veiled in noir, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare. Relax your mind. Let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 1. I work at a mid-sized insurance company on the third floor of an office building that went up in the late 70s. I've only been here 5 months. My desk is in the corner right near the emergency exit. It isn't a good desk. The overhead light flickers all the time. The heating vent above me makes a steady ticking sound that facilities has checked twice and called normal. I don't love it, but rent in this city is brutal and the paycheck is decent. So I show up, sit down, and get through the day. This morning I got in at 8:15, like I always do. My computer was still asleep, my coffee wasn't even warm yet, and I was half thinking about the weekend when I noticed something sitting on my keyboard. A sealed envelope, plain white, standard letter size, no company logo, no department, no HR stamp, just my first and last name written in blue ballpoint pen. Neat and careful, like whoever wrote it wanted to be sure it reached me, and only me. I checked around my desk without meaning to. The floor was already waking up. Footsteps, printers, a couple of quiet voices. Nobody was looking in my direction. Nobody looked like they had just dropped something off. The envelope had that clean, untouched look, like it hadn't been handled by 5 different people on its way to my desk. It felt deliberate. I opened it right there. Inside was a single-typed page, no signature, no letterhead, no email address, just a block of text like it had been printed at home, slipped into an envelope and carried in with a plan. I'm going to rewrite it here as closely as I can. I've read it enough times now that most of it is burned into my memory. The original is in my lap as I type this, and every time I look down at it, I feel the same cold pressure in my chest, like the air in the office has somehow gotten heavier. It started like this. This is not a formal resignation letter, even though I am resigning today. This letter is for you. I am sorry I did not write it sooner. I have worked in this building for 4 years. In that time, I have watched 3 people sit at the desk you are sitting at now. I am in a different department on a different floor, but I passed your corner every morning on my way to the stairwell. And I have learned to watch that desk the way you watch a trap you cannot disarm. The first person lasted 8 months. The second lasted 5. The third lasted 11 weeks. By the time you read this, I will be gone. I cleared my desk last night after everyone left. I cannot be in this building anymore. I cannot walk past your corner one more time and say nothing. So I am saying it now, and then I am leaving. The lights above your desk will flicker. They already do. You have already mentioned it to someone. I know because everyone who sits there mentions it within the first 2 months. You will start losing small pieces of time. Nothing dramatic. You will look at your computer clock and 20 minutes will have passed that you cannot account for. You will assume you were focused on work and lost track. You were not focused on work. You were gone. Not asleep, not distracted. Gone. The gap will feel like nothing, because you will not have any memory of it. It will just be 20 minutes later than it should be, and you will blink and move on. This has probably already started. Check your sent emails, look for gaps between timestamps. You will find windows where you apparently did nothing for 15 or 20 minutes in the middle of a workday. No sent emails. No saved documents. No browser history. Nothing. You were at your desk. Your badge did not log you leaving the floor. But for those minutes, You were not there. Then the dreams start. I am not going to describe them because the last person I tried to warn did not take me seriously until the dreams began, and then she could not stop talking about what she saw in them. And talking about them is what made it faster. Do not describe them to anyone, not a friend, not a therapist, not online. The dreams are how it maps you. When you talk about them, you are giving it a signal to follow. Keep them to yourself. I know that is difficult advice. When the dreams start, you will want very badly to tell someone. That urge is not yours. That urge is part of it. I do not know what it is. I have spent 3 years trying to find out. The building was constructed in 1978. Before that, there was a smaller office building on the same lot. Before that, there was a house. I could not find records on the house. The county office said the records for that parcel were damaged in a basement flood in 1991. I do not believe that. I believe someone removed them. The desk you are sitting at is positioned in the corner of the building that corresponds to a specific room in the original house. I do not know what happened in that room. I only know that whatever happened left something in that spot. Not in the building, in the ground, beneath the foundation, in the dirt, under the concrete, under the carpet, under your chair. It is below you right now. It has always been below that desk. The building was built on top of it. I do not think the builders knew. I think it was already waiting when they poured the foundation. The 3 people before you all left the company. The first one quit and moved out of state. I found her on social media. She does not remember working here. She does not remember the dreams. She has a 2-year gap in her resume that she cannot explain, and she has posted about it publicly, and she seems confused by it in a way that does not look like someone who simply forgot a job. The second one was terminated for performance issues. He started falling asleep at his desk every day, multiple times. He could not stop. He told HR he was not sleeping at night. They suggested medical leave. He refused. He said he was afraid to sleep at home because the dreams followed him there, and he felt safer sleeping at the desk. He said that out loud to his manager. They let him go the next week. I saw him in the parking lot on his last day. He was sitting in his car staring at the building. He sat there for 4 hours. I watched from the window. He did not start the engine. He just sat and stared. Then he drove away and I never saw him again. The third person is still in the building. You know her. She works on the 4th floor. She has dark circles under her eyes that never go away. She has worked here for 2 years since transferring from your desk. She asked to be moved. She did not explain why. They gave her a different desk on a different floor. The dreams stopped when she moved. But she does not sleep fully anymore, not ever. She told me once in the stairwell that she figured something out about the dreams. She said, if you keep one eye open, you do not go all the way under. You stay on the surface. It cannot reach you on the surface, only in the deep. She has not closed both eyes at the same time in 2 years. She sleeps with one eye open every single night. She is exhausted permanently, but she is still herself. That is more than I can say for the first 2. I am not brave enough to stay. I am not brave enough to sleep with one eye open for the rest of my career. I am barely brave enough to write this letter. If you want to talk to someone who understands what is happening to you, find the woman on the 4th floor. You will know which one she is. She looks like she has not slept since the day she was born. She will not want to talk, but she will. She has been waiting for someone else to sit at that desk so she is not alone with what she knows. I am sorry. I should have said something on your first day. I was afraid that saying it out loud would make it notice me. I am on a different floor, different corner. It has never reached me. I want to keep it that way. That is the truth of why I waited. I was protecting myself. I am not proud of it. Please do not try to find me after today. That was it. No name, no good luck, no fake friendly closing. Just a warning that read like a confession from someone sprinting out of a burning building. I sat at my desk and read it 3 times. Each time I got to the part about losing time, my eyes drifted to the computer clock without me even choosing to do it. It was like I expected it to jump forward right then, as if the letter itself could trigger it. Then I did exactly what it told me to do. I opened my sent emails and started going backward through months of timestamps. At first, I didn't see anything. I thought, of course I don't. People zone out at work all the time. You stare at a spreadsheet. You get pulled into a meeting. You refill your water. Nothing shows up in sent mail for half an hour, and it means nothing. But I didn't just look at my sent folder. I checked everything. Browser history, document saves, Teams messages, the tiny traces a normal workday leaves behind even when you're not trying, and there were gaps. Not 1 or 2. 14 windows, 10 to 25 minutes each, where there was nothing. Not even a little. No email drafts, no keyboard activity that left a mark. No web history, no saved file. No message, just a blank spot in the middle of a weekday, right in the middle of my normal work hours, like someone took a clean eraser to my day. The strangest part was how ordinary the gaps looked. They weren't clustered around lunch. They weren't at the end of the day when I might have been packing up. They were scattered across 5 months like random pinholes. My badge logs didn't show me leaving the floor during any of those windows. I was at my desk. I was logged in. But there was no proof I was actually there in any meaningful way. And I hadn't noticed a single one until today. At 9 a.m., I went straight to HR. I didn't even try to act casual. My hands were cold and my face felt tight, like I'd been out in winter air too long. I asked if anyone had resigned suddenly, effective immediately, without notice. HR confirmed it right away. Yes, someone resigned this morning. Immediate effective date. No reason listed. Desk cleared. Badge returned. Gone. I asked who it was. They wouldn't tell me. I asked about the people who had the corner desk before me. How often that desk turned over. If it was known as a bad spot. If there had been any complaints. They gave me the standard line about privacy. Then the woman behind the counter paused and said, carefully, like she was stepping around a pothole, some desks just don't work for people. Then she looked away, as if she didn't want to see my face when she said it. That was when a small part of me stopped trying to explain it as office gossip or a prank. HR people deal with real problems all day. They know what performance issues look like. They know what burnout looks like. That look away wasn't, I'm tired of your questions. It was, please stop asking me before I say something I'm not allowed to say. At lunch, I went up to the 4th floor. I didn't run. I didn't want to look strange. I walked slowly, like I was just stretching my legs, like I belonged there. I took a lap around the floor, scanning faces, trying to spot anyone who looked like they hadn't slept in years. I found her near the far wall, in a cubicle that felt slightly cut off from the rest, not because of its location, but because of how people seemed to give it space. Before I even saw her clearly, I saw something else. The woman in the cubicle next to hers leaned away by a few inches. Not dramatically, not like she was afraid, just like her body had learned, without thinking, to create an extra margin. Then I saw the woman the letter meant. She looked exactly like the description. Not tired, not stressed. Her dark circles looked permanent, like they had become part of her face, the kind of exhaustion that stops being an emotion and turns into a physical feature. Her left eye sat slightly more open than the right, almost like a habit she couldn't turn off. I sat down across from her and said, I sit at the desk on the third floor, the one in the corner by the emergency exit. She didn't look surprised. She didn't ask why I was talking to her. She just closed the folder she'd been holding and stared at me for a long time, like she was checking whether I was real. Then she said, How long? 5 months, I told her. Have the dreams started? No, they will, she said, and there was no drama in her voice, no attempt to scare me, just certainty. Probably in the next few weeks. How often do you lose time? She nodded like I'd told her it might rain later. Then she leaned slightly closer, keeping her voice low even though nobody nearby seemed to be listening. When the dreams start, she said, do not describe them to anyone, not out loud, not in writing, not even in your own head if you can help it. The more shape you give them, the more real they become, and the easier it is for it to hold you there. I asked her what she meant by it. Her eyes stayed on me, unevenly open, steady and flat in a way that felt practiced. I don't know what it is, she said. I know it's under the building. I know it's under that corner specifically. I know it reaches you through the desk, through the chair, through the floor. I know it wants you asleep. I know the dreams aren't dreams. They're a place. And if you go too deep into that place, you don't come back the same. I asked her about the one-eye thing. I felt ridiculous asking, like I was repeating an urban legend, but I couldn't stop. The words came out on their own. She almost smiled. It wasn't a real smile. It was more like her face remembered what a smile used to be. It works, she said. I don't know why, but it works. When I sleep with one eye cracked open, I stay in the shallow part. I can feel it pulling, but it can't get a full grip. It needs both eyes closed, full darkness, full surrender. If any part of you is still watching, it can't take you under. I asked her if she was okay. That was when her expression shifted slightly, not into anger, not into sadness, just into something honest. I haven't been okay in 2 years, she said, but I'm still me. That's enough. I sat there for a moment, hearing the office sounds around us. Keyboards, printers, muffled laughter from a break room, and it all felt like a thin layer over something else, like the entire building was a disguise. When I went back downstairs, the third floor felt different. It looked the same, but the corner near the emergency exit felt like a marked spot, like a place that had been circled on a map and I was the only one walking into it every day. Now I'm back at my desk. It's 4 p.m. The light above me has flickered 6 times since I sat down. I counted them. I've been counting everything since this morning. Flickers, minutes, the tiny noises the vent makes, the number of times someone walks past my desk toward the stairwell. I don't know if I believe any of this. Part of me thinks the letter was written by someone with a serious mental health problem who latched onto a corner desk and built an entire story around normal office weirdness. Fluorescent lights flicker. Buildings make sounds. People quit. People burn out. It happens. But another part of me can't let go of the 14 gaps, 14 blank windows where my workday simply doesn't exist. I don't remember zoning out. I don't remember staring at the wall. I don't remember getting up for water. I don't remember anything at all because to me those minutes weren't boring. They weren't there. And the woman on the 4th floor is real. Her exhaustion is real. The way she spoke wasn't dramatic or excited. She didn't sound like she was trying to convince me of a story. She sounded like someone passing along instructions the way you'd tell someone how to get out of a burning room without inhaling too much smoke. Survival instructions. That's what it felt like. So I'm putting this out there, outside the building, because I want a record that exists somewhere that isn't inside these walls. If something happens, if I start losing more time, if the dreams start, if I become one of those people who leaves and somehow forgets an entire stretch of their life, I want there to be proof that I noticed before I disappeared. The light just flickered again. I'm watching it. I'm watching everything now. Story 2. I'm not really sure what's been happening to me lately, and I'm hoping someone here has heard of something like it. I'm running out of ideas, and I don't know who to talk to without sounding like I'm either lying or losing my mind. It started a few weeks ago with something that felt small enough to ignore. I woke up and found dark bruises on both hips. Not light ones either. Deep, black-purple bruises that looked like someone had grabbed me hard. They hurt in that slow, sore way bruises do when you press them, and it made it uncomfortable to even twist at the waist. The thing is, I couldn't explain them. I don't play sports. I hadn't been drinking. I didn't remember falling or bumping into anything. I tried to think back through the night like that would help, but all I could remember was going to bed, closing my eyes, and then waking up. I also didn't feel rested. My whole body felt heavy and my head felt thick, like I'd been awake all night. When I looked in the mirror, the bags under my eyes made it obvious it wasn't just in my head. Still, I told myself it had to be something normal. Maybe I'd been rolling in my sleep and hit the sides of the bed frame. That explanation almost made sense because my bed is a piece of junk. It's an old metal frame my mom bought at some rural estate fair because she thought it looked vintage. It's the kind of bed that creaks if you breathe too hard. The paint is chipped, the corners are sharp, and the metal rails sit in the exact places where you'd hurt yourself if you moved the wrong way. It looks like the kind of thing that would give you tetanus just from touching it. But I'm 23, and I'm not going back to sleeping on a futon, so I've kept it. I would have let it go if it had been a one-time thing, but the next morning, there were new bruises, and the morning after that, there were even more. By the third night, I couldn't pretend it was nothing. I woke up with fresh marks on my shoulders and along my ribs, like someone had pressed fingers into me hard enough to leave prints. My muscles ached, like I'd been doing heavy work. My legs felt sore too, especially in the calves, the way they feel after you've walked too far in bad shoes. And every morning I felt more tired than the last. Not just sleepy, drained, like whatever rest I'd gotten had been stolen. My eyes looked wrong. My skin looked dull. I started to feel jumpy during the day, and I caught myself staring at my bedroom door like it might open on its own. It's almost summer, but I started wearing long sleeves anyway. High collars, clothes I normally wouldn't touch this time of year, not because I'm fashionable, but because I didn't want my flatmates asking questions. They're good people. If they saw bruises on my neck and shoulders, they'd freak out, and honestly, I couldn't blame them. I didn't want them to start guessing. Once people start guessing, things can get messy fast. That was when I decided to check if I was sleepwalking. It felt like the only normal explanation left. I don't have a history of it, but I figured maybe stress was doing something to me. A friend of mine had an Apple Watch, and I asked to borrow it. My thought was simple. If I was getting up at night and wandering around, the watch would show steps. It might even show movement at certain times. I almost wish I'd never tried. The fourth morning was the worst so far. None of the old bruises had faded. They layered over each other, turning my skin into a patchwork of colors. Black, blue, yellow, and that ugly greenish shade bruises get when they're healing. When I looked at myself in the mirror, I had this sudden, sick thought that my body looked spoiled, like fruit left out too long, like rot. And this time, there were bite marks on my thighs, of all places. They were oval-shaped and swollen, dotted with little crescent cuts. where teeth had broken skin. There were flecks of dried blood stuck to my skin. I stood there staring at them, trying to force myself to think logically. Maybe I did it to myself. Maybe I scratched in my sleep and didn't realize it. But it didn't look like scratching. It looked like someone's mouth. I grabbed the Apple Watch, desperate for proof that I'd been up and moving around, desperate for anything that made sense. I opened the activity tracking and felt my stomach drop. The watch wasn't even on me. It was sitting on my bedside table, not knocked off or tangled in my sheets, placed there, like someone had taken it off on purpose and set it down neatly. The band was open. I remember just sitting on the edge of the bed, holding the watch, trying to breathe through that rising panic. I kept thinking, how could it be on the table? If I sleepwalked, why would I remove it first? And if I didn't remove it, who did? I thought about going to a doctor, but I couldn't make myself do it. Because what would I even say? I keep waking up bruised and bitten, and I don't know why. They'd assume the obvious. They'd think someone was hurting me. They'd start asking about my relationships, my home, my safety. They might even call someone. And the worst part was I couldn't even argue with them because if I saw another person with these marks, I would think the same thing. At that point, being sent somewhere else didn't even sound terrible. A shelter, a friend's couch, anything. If changing where I slept would stop it, I would have taken that option in a heartbeat. But I didn't have proof of anything. I didn't have a name. I didn't have a face. I didn't even have memories. I started crying right there in bed, staring down at my own legs like they belonged to someone else. I called in sick to work because the idea of putting on a normal face and acting like everything was fine felt impossible. Eventually, I forced myself up and went into the bathroom. I wanted to wash. Not just the blood, everything, the feeling of it. The idea of hands on me that I couldn't remember. In my mind, I could almost picture it. Being grabbed, being held down, being touched. It was like my body remembered something my brain wouldn't let me see. I turned on the shower and started scrubbing hard, almost angrily. I was so focused on cleaning myself that I didn't notice something right away. There was blood in the bathroom. At first, I thought maybe one of my flatmates had a heavy period and used my stuff. I know that sounds strange, but it's the kind of excuse your brain grabs when it's trying to stay calm. If it had been the toilet, I could have believed it. But it wasn't the toilet. It was the sink. The basin was filled with blood-dark water, thick and still. It reminded me of stagnant water you'd see in a neglected bucket outside. Heavy, unmoving, like it should have insects breeding on the surface. The smell was metallic and sour. I stood there frozen, my skin covered in goosebumps. The drain was plugged. Something was stopping it from going down. I couldn't make myself put my hand in it. I felt sick just looking at it. So I grabbed the toilet brush, used the handle like a stick, and pushed down into the drain until whatever was blocking it shifted. The surface rippled, and the water started to pull down in a slow swirl, leaving streaks along the porcelain. I don't even remember finishing my shower properly after that. I just remember feeling like I was being watched, even though I was alone behind a locked door. After that morning, I stopped trying to pretend it was going to go away. I started trying to prove what was happening. I set my phone up to record me sleeping. I positioned it so it could see the bed, plugged it in so it wouldn't die, made sure the camera was pointed right at me. I even tested it during the day to make sure it worked. When I woke up, the phone was powered off. Not dead, not low battery, powered off. And the video file was there, but it had stopped about 30 minutes in, as if someone had ended it manually. I tried something else. I put salt by the bedroom drawer. I know how that sounds. I'm not even saying I believe in it, but I was desperate, and I'd heard the old stories about salt being a barrier. I figured if nothing else, it would show whether I left the room. It would show footprints. It would show something. In the morning, the salt was gone, swept up, clean like it was never there. I locked the windows. I checked them twice. I checked the front door. I even started putting my keys in my flatmate's room before bed, so I couldn't leave and lock myself out. Nothing changed. I still woke up with new marks. By then, the bruising on my neck had gotten so bad I was covering it almost up to my chin. I wore turtlenecks and scarves even when it was warm outside. People started noticing anyway. Not the marks, but the way I was acting. The way I flinched when someone came up behind me. The way I looked exhausted all the time. My friends started asking if I was okay, and I kept saying I was just stressed, just not sleeping well. The truth was, I didn't know how to tell anyone what was happening. Because the moment I said, someone is hurting me and I don't know who, it would sound like I was protecting an abuser, like I was hiding something, like I was lying. And maybe, from the outside, that's what it would look like. I got so close to calling my mom, so close to asking if I could come home and sleep in her spare room, or even in her bed like I was a kid again. But the thought of whatever this was following me there made me feel sick. I couldn't live with myself if she got hurt. Whatever is doing this to me, I don't even know how to describe it. A person, a thing, something. All I knew was that I was only safe when I was awake, so I started sleeping less, pushing myself through the day on caffeine and adrenaline. Because if I stayed awake, it couldn't happen, right? That's what I told myself. Then something happened that I can't shake. I was about to post this the other night, but I didn't. And the next morning, when I left my building, there was a homeless man outside. That's not unusual where I live. There are always people sleeping in doorways or near the bus stop. But this man looked right at me like he recognized me, and he said, "Smile for me again. You were so happy last night." My heart started racing immediately. I asked him what he meant because I didn't remember seeing him. I didn't remember going out. I didn't remember anything last night except staring at my ceiling and begging myself to stay awake. He squinted at me like he was trying to focus on a memory. Then he said he remembered I had red stuff all over my face and that a man dressed in all black walked me to my door. I tried to tell myself he was drunk, or confused, or mixing me up with another girl in the building. But the problem was that this was the first real piece of outside confirmation I'd gotten, the first hint that I might be leaving my apartment without knowing, or that someone might be bringing me back. It made me feel like the ground under me wasn't solid anymore. After that, the bruises got worse. The bites got worse. I started finding cuts, too small ones, like scratches, like something sharp had caught my skin. My wrists were red and tender, the skin rubbed raw in a way that looked like rope burns. My throat hurt, and when I looked in the mirror, the bruising there was so clear it looked like fingerprints. There were thin scratches on my hips like nail marks. I couldn't stand it anymore. So I made a decision. A stupid one, maybe, but it felt like the only way to take control of my own body for once. I decided I wouldn't sleep. Not at all. If sleep was when it happened, then I'd stay awake for one night, even if it broke me. I wanted one night where my body stayed mine. I locked the doors. I locked the windows. I pulled the curtains. I sat on my bed with the TV on, letting the noise fill the room. I kept the lights on. I kept checking my phone for the time like that would keep me grounded. Around 2 a.m., my computer started acting strange. The screen flickered a few times. The fan got loud. Then it shut off on its own. Not like it crashed, like someone had held the power button down. I stared at it for a long time, waiting for it to turn back on. It didn't. I got off the bed, thinking maybe lying down was too close to temptation. I sat on the floor instead, hoping the discomfort would keep me awake. I leaned against the side of the bed frame, feeling the cold metal through my shirt. At 3 a.m., my phone powered itself off. Again, not dead. Powered off, I tried to turn it back on immediately, but it wouldn't respond. The screen stayed black. I pressed buttons until my fingers hurt. Nothing. After that, time stopped feeling normal. Without my phone, without a clock, I couldn't tell if 10 minutes passed or an hour. The room felt wrong, too quiet in between the TV sounds, too still. Then the pain started. Every cut and bruise on my body began to burn at the same time. Not like soreness, like fire under the skin. It spread across my hips, my thighs, my ribs, up my neck. It was so intense it made me dizzy. I lay on the floor, shaking, trying to slap my own skin to distract from it, trying to press my palms into the worst spots. I bit down on my lip to keep from sobbing too loudly and waking my flatmates. My eyes kept watering anyway, and I don't know when it shifted from pain to fear. I don't know when I started believing I wasn't alone. Maybe I imagined it, maybe I didn't. But I heard footsteps, soft at first, then clearer, coming down the hallway toward my bedroom door. My body went cold. I held my breath, listening, so hard it felt like my ears rang. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. Nothing happened for a few minutes, just silence. The kind that feels full, like someone is standing still. Then I heard a trickle, liquid, running along the floor. A smell hit me a second later, sharp and disgusting like gasoline. It spread under the door, strong enough to make my eyes sting. I stared at the crack at the bottom of the door and saw the dark shine creeping in. My brain didn't want to understand what that meant. It kept trying to come up with other explanations, anything else. But then another smell rose up underneath it. Smoke. Heat started pressing into the room. The air got thicker. I crawled toward the door, coughing, the burning in my skin now mixing with the burning in my lungs. When I reached for the doorknob, it was already hot. Too hot. The metal burned my palm, and I jerked back with a cry. I wrapped my sleeve around my hand and tried again, forcing myself to grip it. I couldn't stay in there. When I finally got the door open, I expected to see flames in the hallway. I didn't. I never even saw the fire. That's the part I can't explain. 1 second I was pulling the door open and bracing myself to run through smoke and heat. And the next, there was nothing. No hallway, no sound, no sense of space. Just blank. I woke up in a hospital bed. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Clean chemicals, plastic, that hospital air that sticks in your nose. The second thing I noticed was that my tongue hurt, badly, like I'd bitten it in half. When I moved my mouth, I tasted blood. I reached up with a shaking hand and felt the swelling, a bite mark. A nurse came in soon after. She looked at me with that careful expression people wear when they think they're looking at someone trapped in something they can't admit. Soft eyes, pity, the kind of face that says, "We can help you. Just tell us who did it." And I knew right away what they thought. They thought they could save me from him, from the person hurting me. They thought they could move me somewhere safe, call the right people, put me in the system, protect me. I didn't correct them. I didn't know how, because I don't think a place like that exists. Not for what's happening to me, not for whatever is waiting until I close my eyes. Story 3. Last night at 3:14 a.m., I got a notification from Theodore. It was a private link to a cloud drive with a message that said, "That wasn't a human. in all caps. I'm sitting here in the dark with my laptop balanced on my knees. The cursor is hovering over the play button. My hand is shaking so badly I can hear the trackpad clicking. Theodore saw something that made him run and leave me behind. Whatever he saw scared him so much, he didn't even think. He just bolted, screaming like he thought he was going to die. I don't want to watch the video alone. I feel like the second I see what was standing on those steps behind me, it stops being something I can try to rationalize. It becomes real. I still don't really know what chased us out of that hospital, but it started like this. Theodore always turns into a different person the moment a camera is on him. Even his voice changes. It's like he can't decide if he wants to sound deeper and confident or high and excited. So he ends up in this weird middle zone that makes him sound like a kid whose voice is cracking every 5 seconds. "All righty, Ted heads," he said, holding his camcorder up. Then he winced and shook his head. No, let me try that again. I sounded too much like Jim Carrey there. I stood a few feet away and watched him hype himself up, already regretting that I agreed to come out with him at night. Theodore loved filming. He didn't just like recording places. He liked performing for the invisible audience in his head. He tried again. "All right, Ted heads. Today I have something special planned for all of you." "Oh God, here we go," I muttered, mostly to myself. My friend Blake and I, Theodore swung the camcorder toward me. I gave a small, awkward wave, the kind you do when you don't know what else to do. He immediately snapped the camera back to his face. "Are going to be playing hide and seek." He raised his free hand like he was calming down a cheering crowd. Now, I know what you're all thinking. Hide and seek is for little boys, and Blake and I are not. Well, actually, Blake is a bit of a little boy. He pointed the camcorder back at me again. This time, I didn't even hesitate. I flipped him off. Theodore swung it back to himself, grinning hard. He's just mad because it's true. I rolled my eyes. Theodore forced out this loud, fake snort laugh, the kind he does when he thinks it adds to the bit. Jokes aside, he said, "Yes, we're playing hide and seek as grown men, but before you start roasting us, let me show you our chosen arena." He turned the camcorder around, and the shot widened to show where we were. An old abandoned hospital stood in front of us. Theodore laughed like he was proud of himself. "That's right, you beautiful cowards. We're playing hide and seek in that spooky Scooby-Doo looking place." The hospital looked wrong in a way I can't fully explain. Even if it had been clean and open, it would have felt unsettling. The building was huge, with a tall, flat face and rows of windows that stared out like dead eyes. It was surrounded by trees and brush, like the forest had tried to swallow it, and never quite managed. What bothered me most was the location. Who builds a hospital in the middle of the woods? Even out here, where towns can be spaced far apart, this felt too far from anything. Too isolated, too quiet. Theodore had to step back to get the whole thing in frame. The facade was so large it made us look small, like we were kids about to break into somewhere we shouldn't. "Now here are the rules," Theodore said, flipping the camcorder back toward his face. "I'll give Blake 30 seconds to hide. That should be plenty, because this place is as big as his mom." I stopped listening after that. Theodore always had the same kind of jokes, just shuffled into new shapes. I watched the building instead. Most of the windows were intact, but they were cloudy with dust. The front steps were cracked, with weeds growing through the seams. The entrance looked like a mouth that had been forced shut. I glanced at the upper floors and noticed faint cracks running up parts of the concrete exterior. Nothing looked like it would collapse immediately, but I made a mental note not to go too high. Old buildings don't always warn you before they fail. I dressed for this, too. Theodore had mocked me for wearing a red beanie and a flannel like I was trying out for a lumberjack role in some cheap movie. But I wasn't about to ruin my good clothes crawling through a dusty, abandoned hospital. Theodore, on the other hand, showed up in a bright white Supreme jacket and neon shoes that looked like they cost more than my grocery bill. I couldn't wait for him to realize what a terrible idea that was. "All righty then," Theodore said, dragging out the words. "Now that I am done explaining the deep complexities of hide and seek, it's time to begin." He pointed the camera at me and started counting down from 30. I thought he was going to keep talking for another minute, so the countdown caught me off guard. I quickly put on my dust mask, pulled it tight, and ran up the hospital steps. Inside, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Not rot, not death, but that dry, old, choking smell of dust that has been sitting still for decades. The waiting room was mostly empty. No chairs, no tables, nothing comforting. It felt stripped, like someone removed every normal human thing and left only the shell. There were 2 hallways. One went left, the other went straight past what used to be the reception desk. I picked the left hallway because it had some light coming through the filthy windows. Even weak light felt better than nothing. I was halfway down when I heard Theodore call, "Wait, what?" I yelled back. He appeared at the entrance, hurrying after me, and I realized something immediately. He wasn't holding the camcorder anymore. He had a flashlight instead. "We're not actually playing hide and seek," he said. I stopped walking and stared at him. "What do you mean, Theodore?" He made a face like I was the one being unreasonable. "First, I told you to start calling me Teddy. Second, we're staging this. I don't want to actually wander around this creepy place looking for you." I blinked at him, annoyed but not shocked. Theodore always changed plans mid-sentence. "Really? Yes," he said, holding his foot up and shining the flashlight at the sole. "Look at the bottom of my shoes already. It's like I stepped in a litter box." His bright neon sole was already coated in gray dust. "Well, I told you not to wear nice clothes, you idiot." Theodore laughed. "I'm sorry, man. With the mask on, it sounds like I'm getting yelled at by Bane." Theodore had this talent for disarming people with jokes, even when you wanted to stay mad. "You think the darkness is your ally," I said, doing my best impression through the mask. Theodore burst out laughing, which immediately turned into coughing. His laugh always turned into coughing. He bent forward slightly, shoulders shaking. "Oh, man," he rasped between coughs. "You can't keep making me laugh in this place." "The mask isn't such a dumb idea now, is it?" I said, patting his back. "Yeah," he wheezed. "This hospital is dustier than your mother's. Don't finish that sentence." He took a couple breaths, recovered, and finally got control of himself. We turned our flashlights on properly and started walking again. The hallway stretched another 15 feet and then veered to the right. Doors lined the walls, each one hanging slightly crooked, each one looking like it could lead to something empty or something worse. We peeked into room after room. Most were the same: faded walls, rusted bed frames, a few broken cabinets. Sometimes we'd see old tile, sometimes cracked linoleum. Everything felt drained of color. My flashlight beam made the dust sparkle in the air, like the building was full of tiny, floating particles waiting to get inside your lungs. "When do you think this place was built?" Theodore asked as we rounded the corner into another hallway that looked almost identical to the last, with the Art Deco exterior, the polka-dotted tile floors, and how uniform the layout is. "I'd guess the 1930s, I said. Theodore smirked. "And the fact that you know that screams, 'I'm a virgin.'" "The camera is off, Theodore," I said. "You don't have to keep doing jokes." I expected him to clap back, but instead I heard him gasp, genuinely excited. "Oh my God," he said. "Does that say what I think it says?" Before I could ask what he meant, he started coughing again, like the excitement triggered it. He pointed his flashlight down the hall. I followed the beam until it landed on a door. At first, it looked like all the other doors, scratched wood, dusty frosted glass window. Then I saw the lettering on the glass. M-O-G-R-D. The letters were black, faded and peeling, but still readable. "Oh, no way," I said, unable to hide that part of me that found this exciting in the same sick way people slow down to stare at car crashes. Theodore walked toward it like he'd just found buried treasure. We stood close and wiped a layer of dust off the glass. There was no doubt. It said morgue. "Oh, this is so spooky," Theodore said, and pulled his camcorder out of his bag like a magician revealing a final trick. He started recording again, then nodded at me. "You want to do the honors?" I rolled my eyes. "Of course." I grabbed the brass doorknob. It felt grimy and cold. I turned it halfway and it stuck. I put more force into it until I felt something inside give. The latch released with a harsh little snap. I tugged the door open. It creaked loud enough that it sounded like the building itself was complaining. On the other side were concrete stairs leading down into darkness. The stairs dropped 5 steps and then vanished into shadow, like the basement swallowed light. Theodore and I shined our flashlights down. The stairway continued about 15 more steps to a landing. Theodore leaned in, filming over my shoulder. "Oh, and it's a basement," he said, like he'd just been handed the perfect script. He looked at me again and nodded the same silent, annoying command as before. "Go first." I went down because I didn't want to stand there arguing. I kept my light aimed at my feet. The steps were worn and uneven. The concrete looked chewed up, jagged in places. One bad slip and you'd break something. At the bottom, the air felt colder. Not just cooler, but cold like it came from something that never saw sunlight. I swept my flashlight across the room. The first thing it hit was a metal table bolted into the floor, a thick stained table with a drain. You didn't need to be a doctor to know what happened there. My stomach tightened as I moved the beam. There were more tables just like it, 3 of them in total, lined up like stations. Farther ahead, at the end of the room, was an open elevator shaft. No doors, just a dark rectangle that dropped into deeper darkness. Later, I realized that was probably how they moved bodies. Then, suddenly, the sound hit us. "Ree!" Metal shrieked against metal. My heart slammed so hard I felt it in my throat. I whipped my flashlight to the right. Theodore was standing there grinning, holding open one of the cold storage chambers. He looked like he was having the best day of his life. "I think I've found your hiding spot," he said. "Absolutely not," I said. The words came out loud. Angry, panicked. "I am not getting in that thing." Theodore tilted his head. "But I thought the darkness was your ally." I ignored him, pulled my dust mask down for a second so my voice would stop sounding muffled, and said, "Fuck you." That had dead people in it. I shined my flashlight at the metal tray inside the chamber. It was coated in grime, stains, dust that had packed into the corners like old snow. "It hasn't had anyone dead in it in like 80 years, Theodore said. "That somehow made it worse." "That doesn't make it better," I snapped. And then I started coughing, hard. The mask helped, but the air down there was still full of fine, powdery crap. Theodore patted my back until it stopped. I pulled the mask up again and looked him straight in the face. "I'm not doing it. All right?" He held his hands up. Okay, okay. Fine. Even though I expected it, the sound still made me flinch. Will you at least hide somewhere down here? Theodore asked. Just for the video. I didn't want to stay in the morgue longer than we had to, but I also didn't want to drag this out. Sure, I said. I scanned the room with my flashlight, looking for something that wouldn't make my skin crawl. There weren't many options. More cold chambers lined the walls. The autopsy tables were in the open. The elevator shaft was a death trap. Then my flashlight landed on something in the far left corner. A large white medicine cabinet that looked oddly intact compared to everything else. I'll hide in the medicine cabinet, I said. Theodore's eyes lit up like he'd just discovered a secret level in a video game. We walked over together. The cabinet was tall, with multiple compartments. We opened the bottom cupboard and found it was big enough for me to squeeze into. When I opened it, I was surprised by how clean it was. Not clean, but cleaner than everything else. Less grime, less dust. Like someone had wiped it down at some point. I crouched and folded myself into it, pulling my knees in. I fit better than I expected. Told you, Theodore said. You're a little boy. I gave him one last middle finger. He laughed and closed the cupboard doors. The sound of his footsteps echoed as he climbed back up the stairs. Then I heard the door at the top close, shutting me in down there. For about a minute it was silent. I sat there in the dark, trying to get comfortable, trying not to think about what a stupid idea this was. I turned my flashlight off to conserve battery, and because I didn't want light leaking through the cracks of the cabinet doors. I figured Theodore would do his countdown and then come right back. He already had plenty of footage of us walking around. He'd gotten his morgue moment. We'd be out of there soon. To pass the time, I started my own countdown in my head. 30, 29, 28, 27, I made it down to 14 when the sound ripped through the basement again. Ree! For a second, I stopped being a person and became pure fear. My muscles locked. My mind went blank, except for one thought, loud and simple. What the hell was that? My first instinct was that Theodore had opened a chamber again to mess with me. But the sound came from somewhere deeper in the morgue, not right next to the cabinet. And I hadn't heard him come back down. No footsteps on the stairs, no door creak, nothing. I forced myself to think. Maybe one of the chambers was old and didn't latch properly. Maybe it just slid open. It sounded possible. It sounded reasonable. It sounded like the kind of explanation you want when the other possibility is that something else was down there. Part of me wanted to crack open the cabinet doors and check, just to prove it was nothing, but the stronger part of me said, no, stay put, wait for Theodore. So I stayed. I tried to go back to counting, but I couldn't. Every tiny sound became suspicious. The building made quiet, settling noises, faint creaks that could have been pipes or walls or something, shifting as it cooled. I couldn't tell what was real and what was my brain trying to fill the silence. Then I heard a sound I knew was real. Theodore, I thought at first, and then I heard his voice from above. Blake, he yelled down the stairs. I swear to God if you're down here. He was real. I wasn't alone. He kept talking as he came down. Oh, Blake, you dick, hiding in a morgue. I listened to his footsteps and tried not to move. I didn't want to ruin the shot if he was filming. I wanted him to find me, and we'd leave, and we'd laugh about how dumb this all was. Then Theodore's voice got closer to where the cold chambers were. Wait, he said slowly. Is that... No, Blake, you didn't. He thought I'd hidden in a cold chamber after all. Blake, you animal, he said. and then his voice stopped mid-sentence. The pause didn't sound like a joke pause. It sounded like a brain trying to understand something it couldn't. Then Theodore screamed, not an "oh, you got me" scream, not a funny for the vlog scream. It was raw, animal terror. No. Fuck no. Fuck. His footsteps exploded into frantic running, and I heard him sprinting up the stairs. In the cabinet, every part of me screamed to stay hidden, but the idea of being left down there alone was worse. I shoved the cupboard doors open and stumbled out. "Theodore," I yelled, my voice echoing off the concrete walls. That's when I saw something blinking on the floor in the middle of the morgue. A small light flashing. I went toward it and dropped to one knee. It was Theodore's camcorder. My stomach felt like it fell out of my body. Theodore would not drop that if he was messing around. He loved that thing. He treated it like it was part of him. "Blake, get the fuck out of there!" Theodore screamed from the top of the stairs. Before I could even process what I was doing, I snatched up the camcorder. Behind me, a cold chamber screeched open. The sound was louder and longer than before, like the metal was being forced. My body moved on instinct. I ran. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I couldn't give whatever was behind me the satisfaction of being seen. I charged up the stairs, feet slamming on the concrete, my flashlight bouncing wildly in my hand. I heard something behind me, not just the chamber, something else, a shift of weight, a fast scrape, like bare feet on concrete. I hit the top of the stairs and the pain came at the same time. My foot slipped. My right knee slammed into the edge of a step so hard I heard a pop, like a thick branch snapping. White-hot pain shot up my leg. I felt something brush my head, fingers or something that felt like fingers, tugging at the fabric of my beanie. I didn't stop. I launched myself forward, half falling over the last steps and into the hallway. I didn't look back, not even for a second. Theodore was already running toward the front entrance. I saw him round the first corner. I tried to follow, but my knee was burning. I limped, then hopped, trying to keep speed without collapsing. When I hit the corner, the pain made me lose control. I crashed into a window. A sheet of dust fell from above, a thick powdery cloud, and I made the mistake of inhaling. It was like swallowing sand. My lungs rejected it immediately. I choked, wheezed, and dropped hard to the floor. The impact knocked the air out of me. My body panicked. I crawled forward on my stomach, hacking so violently my eyes watered. Somewhere behind me I heard movement, fast and light. I forced myself up onto one leg and stumbled forward. I made it halfway down the hallway before I fell again. This time I caught myself on my hands and used the momentum to shove back up. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shape in the haze behind me. Not clear, not detailed. Just a silhouette that didn't move like a person. Still, I refused to turn my head. I refused to give it a full view of my face. I kept my eyes forward and dragged myself toward the lobby. The front entrance came into view, and it felt like salvation. I gritted my teeth, put all my weight on my left leg, and pushed through the pain with pure adrenaline. I stumbled out of the hospital and collapsed onto the ground outside, sucking air like I'd been underwater. I heard a car engine roar to life. Theodore's car rolled up fast, gravel and weeds crunching beneath the tires. He flung the passenger door open. "Get in," he shouted. His eyes weren't on me. They were locked on something behind me, something near the hospital steps. That gave me enough fear to move. I gathered whatever strength I had left and threw myself into the passenger seat. Theodore didn't wait for me to get situated. He hit the gas so hard the car lurched. The door slammed shut from the force as we sped away. Relief washed through me in a dizzy wave. For a second, I thought it was over. Then I looked into the rearview mirror. I saw it, just for a moment. A dark figure standing on the hospital steps, watching us leave like it had all the time in the world. The only thing I could make out clearly was what it held in its right hand. A bright red beanie. Mine. Theodore and I tried to talk about it later, once we were somewhere safe and there were lights and other people and normal sounds. We told ourselves it had to be some crazy homeless guy living in the hospital. Someone sick, someone dangerous, someone playing a twisted game with us. But Theodore kept saying the same thing. He needed to see the footage. He needed to know if what he saw was real or if his brain had tricked him. He uploaded it to a private drive. And then at 3:14 a.m., he sent me that link with the message. That wasn't a human. I sat there staring at the link for a long time before I clicked it. Part of me hoped the file would be corrupted. Part of me hoped it wouldn't load. When it finally did, I had to fight the urge to close the laptop and pretend I'd never seen it. Then I pressed play. The video started with us being idiots. Theodore doing his Teddy voice, joking, acting like this was a fun, haunted house adventure. It was almost painful to watch. We looked so relaxed, so confident, like two guys who thought the worst thing that could happen was stepping on a nail. The video jumped forward. I was in the medicine cabinet. The camera was moving through the hallways, Theodore whispering and chuckling to himself, flashlight beam bouncing. Then the camera audio picked up the first "ree" of the cold chamber opening. In the footage, Theodore stopped moving. I could tell exactly what he was thinking. He thought I was messing with him. He sounded excited, like he was about to catch me and get a perfect reaction on camera. "Blake," he said, "I swear to God if you're down here." He headed toward the morgue. "Blake, you dick, hiding in a morgue," he muttered, half laughing. His footsteps echoed as he went down the stairs. The camera work got shakier because he was moving faster now. Then the camera caught the open, cold chamber. "Wait," Theodore said. "Is that—" "No, Blake, you didn't. Just a dirty metal tray." And then he swung the camera to the left, toward the next chamber over. He reached for the handle. He pulled. "Ree!" On the recording, the sound was worse than I remembered. Louder, longer, like metal screaming. A burst of white dust exploded out of the chamber in a freezing cloud, briefly washing out the frame. The camera's autofocus clicked as the dust cleared. There wasn't a body. There wasn't a skeleton. There was a man, if you can call it that. It was crouched on the narrow metal tray like an insect folded into itself. It didn't look like it should fit in there, like its limbs were too long and the space was too small. But it had somehow packed itself inside. Its skin was bone white, slick and pale, like something pulled from under a rock. It was completely naked. And it was smiling. But the smile was wrong. Too wide, stretched from one ear to the other, packed with too many teeth, like a mouth that had been designed by someone who only heard descriptions of humans and never actually saw one. Its hands were long and thin. The fingers looked too long. It held them over its face like it was playing peekaboo, except it wasn't covering its eyes all the way. Through the gap in its fingers, one huge bloodshot eye stared straight into the camera. It didn't blink. It looked amused. The camcorder slammed to the floor. The footage turned into blurred shots of polka-dotted tile and streaks of light. I could hear Theodore scrambling, screaming, running up the stairs. The audio caught the panic in his breathing, the way he couldn't even form words anymore. Then I heard my own voice in the distance shouting his name. I heard the heavy thud of my body hitting the ground as I ran and grabbed the camcorder. The rest was chaos, running, coughing, the echo of our footsteps, Theodore screaming at me to get out. Then the video cut to black once we were in the car. I just sat there staring at my laptop screen, frozen, listening to the quiet in my room. That's when I noticed something in the reflection on the black screen. A red beanie. Just the edge of it, peeking up from outside my window like someone was standing too close to the glass. My blood turned cold. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I didn't even blink. And I didn't look back. Story 4. My life didn't fall apart all at once. It slid. Quietly at first, then faster, then all at once. If I'm being honest, spring 2022 is when the slide turned into a drop. I need to start there because without that part, everything that happened after sounds like I'm just telling a creepy story for attention. I'm not. I'm writing this down because I don't know what's real anymore. And because if I don't put the details somewhere outside my head, I'm going to talk myself into doing something even worse than I already have. It started at a Buffalo Wild Wings. A few friends and I were there watching UFC. The place was loud, greasy, crowded, in that familiar way where you can't really hear the commentary, but everyone still reacts at the same time when something big happens. I'd just passed some exams. I was feeling good about myself, and I was 5 or 6 drinks deep. The world felt wide open, like life was finally going to start going my way. Somebody mentioned betting. I'd never gambled before. I had a vague idea of parlays, the kind of thing you hear about on podcasts or see in ads. I didn't know enough to be scared of it. I only knew enough to think it looked easy, especially when you're drunk and feeling lucky. So I made a small parlay before the main card. $15. Harmless. A joke. I turned that $15 into a little over $200. It's not even real money. It's the kind of win you forget about the next day. But the way it hit me, the way it lit up my body, you would have thought I'd won the lottery. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. My brain felt bright and loud. It wasn't happiness exactly. It was power. Like the universe had finally nodded at me and said, yes, you get it. That feeling is the problem. I never got it again. Not like that. Even later, when I hit bets that paid out 50 or 60 times more than that first win, it never touched the same high. It was like that first hit rewired something, and the rest of my life became this stupid, desperate chase to feel it again. I'm not going to give you a full timeline of everything I did after that. I don't have the energy, and you don't need it. Just know it got bad. Worse than the version you're picturing right now. I burned bridges I didn't think could burn. I got legal problems I still don't know how I'll deal with. I learned what it feels like to see a strange number calling and feel your stomach twist before you even answer because you already know who it is. Collectors. People who don't sound like they work in an office. For a while, the only reason I stayed afloat at all was my job. It was one of those jobs that pays you well and asks for almost nothing. A lot of sitting in an office. A lot of pretending to be busy. I'd update a spreadsheet, answer a couple emails, maybe do an hour of real work in a whole day. It was the kind of thing you feel guilty about if you're a good person. I was lucky to get it, even luckier to keep it as long as I did, considering the condition I was sliding into. Then consultants got hired, restructuring, trimming the fat. All the words that mean the same thing. People are about to get cut, and it probably won't be fair. I still remember seeing the notification from my manager sitting there on Teams. I stared at it for a full minute before clicking. Like maybe if I waited long enough, it would change. It didn't. I got laid off. I did get a decent severance. That should have been my lifeline. A chance to breathe, to pay down debt, to fix my resume, to start acting like an adult again. You can guess what I did. I gambled with it. And the part that makes it even more pathetic is that it worked, at least at first. I tripled it the very next week, betting on golf of all things. Golf. I didn't even like golf. I was just chasing numbers on a screen, pretending I was a smart person making calculated moves. That's when my brain fully broke in a way I didn't recognize at the time. Because once you triple your severance in a week, the idea of going back to normal work feels almost insulting. Why would I polish my LinkedIn and go to networking events when I could just do this? Learn the system. Become good at it. Become one of those guys online who talks about edge and bankroll management like they're running a business. In my head, no job meant more time to get better. So I studied, like it was school, like it was medicine. Every night I'd dive into statistics, line movement, advanced analytics, injury reports, weather, team psychology, the whole circus. I convinced myself I was becoming an expert. There's a term for that, right? When you think you understand something because you've read just enough to feel confident, but you don't know how deep it actually goes. I called it the Freddy Krueger effect in my head because my brain couldn't even grab the right name. I knew what I meant. I didn't know enough to know how wrong I was. For a while, things seemed okay. Not great, but okay. I'd win enough to keep going. That's how it gets you. It doesn't ruin you all at once. It feeds you little wins so you don't stop. Then one night I was coked out of my mind and placed a huge, stupid bet on a boxing match. I'm not going to name it because it doesn't matter. It lost. Hard. That should have been the moment I stopped. It wasn't. I panicked, tried to recoup, threw together another long-shot parlay for fights the following weekend. Told myself I was due, told myself the odds were value, told myself whatever lie I needed to keep clicking. It lost too. 4 months ago, when I got laid off, I had about $45,000 in liquid savings and around $35,000 in debt. That's not good, but it's survivable if you act like a sane person. Right now, across all my accounts, I have $27.50. I don't even know what the debt number is anymore. I can't bring myself to check. All my credit cards are maxed. My credit score is destroyed. My family won't take my calls. My friends aren't my friends. And every day there are men outside my apartment building who look like they enjoy breaking fingers. They stand by the door like they own the place, like they're just waiting for me to come out. Sometimes they get inside and bang on my door hard enough to make the frame shake. When that happens, I stand in my living room with my phone in my hand, not calling anyone because who would I call? And I just pretend I'm not home, like a child hiding from a monster under the bed. By the time I finally came to my senses and started job searching again, I'd dug myself into something deeper than a hole, a cavern, a place with slick walls. I got a few interviews. Never second rounds. Maybe I looked too exhausted, too wired, too desperate. I don't know, and I hate the whole job interview dance anyway, especially when they ask about gaps in employment, like they're entitled to a clean, polite story. A few days ago, those guys actually tried to break my door down. I heard the wood splintering. It got close. The only reason they stopped was because my neighbor, an older military type who always seems half awake and half ready to fight, came out and threatened to shoot them if they didn't leave. I got lucky. I can't count on lucky twice. That brings me to last night. I was drunk on bottom-shelf vodka and had that dangerous, calm kind of clarity you get when you've been scared for so long your body runs out of adrenaline. I decided to try something shameful, something I'd normally laugh at. I used AI-generated sob stories to beg for money on Reddit. Yeah, I know. I wasn't thinking straight. I told myself I'd edit out the obvious robotic phrasing, make it sound human, and spray the posts across as many subreddits as I could. I didn't even expect much. Maybe a few bucks, enough for groceries, enough to get the collectors off my back for a day or two. Anything. Instead, I got called out almost immediately. Banned from one place, mocked in another, ignored everywhere else. I was about to give up when someone messaged me. He said his name was Scott. He told me he'd seen my post. He said he'd been there and he thought he could help. He said he couldn't just give me money, but he could offer me a quick, reasonably trouble-free way to get some. Nothing illegal, nothing sexual, nothing weird. Then he pitched me on a mall. He said a friend of his was the head of a property group that owned it. The mall was struggling. That part made sense. Most malls are struggling, but he said this one was worse because the location was awful. Nobody should have built a mall where it was built. Yet the owner didn't want it shut down, didn't want it repurposed into something else. He just wanted it to look alive for as long as he could drag it out. Scott said they were recruiting mystery shoppers, except it wasn't really mystery shopping. It was more like paid pretending. You go in, walk around, look like a customer, buy things, eat in the food court, keep the place looking active. Then he gave me a set of instructions that were too specific to feel like a casual scam. He said once I entered, I had to go to the Starbucks on the second floor. Tell the barista I was part of the program, and she'd give me $100 cash. I had to spend all of it while I was inside. I couldn't keep any of it. They'll know, he wrote. Then the real hook. $250 per hour, paid by e-transfer as soon as I left. But I could not leave early, not even 1 second early. I could stay longer if I wanted, but not shorter. I mean that literally, he wrote. He also said if his friend liked my performance, there would be more opportunities. I stared at the message for a long time. It sounded like a joke, but it didn't land like one. There was no punchline, no obvious angle. If it was a scam, what was the scam? Mugging me made no sense. I just admitted I was broke. Kidnapping me for ransom made no sense. Organ harvesting sounded ridiculous until you're sitting alone in an apartment with people pounding on your door and your brain starts treating ridiculous ideas like they're normal. I think I typed all of that out at the time for the same reason I'm writing this now. I wanted to see the words on a screen and have the truth smack me in the face. Don't go. But while I was staring at the message, those guys were banging on my door again. This time, they knocked for 20 minutes straight. Loud enough that I thought the neighbors would call someone, but nobody did. Loud enough that I stood there sweating, waiting for the crack of wood. They didn't break in. They left. Lucky again. I started thinking about how to live if this continued. Spend less time at home. Hide out at the library. Walk around the gym. Anything to avoid being cornered. But even thinking about that made me feel sick. That isn't a life. That's just delaying the moment you get caught. The most urgent problem in my life had a name, and his name was Renzo. I met Renzo at a bar during a big boxing night, the kind of event that turns a normal place into a loud, sweaty room full of people who think they understand fighting because they've had 3 beers. I was wasted and confident and running my mouth. I told him with absolute certainty to bet heavy on a specific fighter. He liked my energy. He did it. He made money. I made money. We drank until the night went blurry. The only clear memory I have is my face pressed to cold concrete at one point. Not in a fun way, not a consensual joke. Just my cheek grinding against the ground, and the sense that someone was holding me there to make sure I understood something. I woke up in Renzo's apartment the next morning, fully clothed, wallet and phone still on me, slumped on a couch with half my face throbbing. When I looked at myself through my phone camera, the skin was red and swollen, scratched up like someone had scraped me against something rough. Renzo walked in smiling and told me he couldn't believe what I'd done the night before. Called me a dog, like it was funny. I didn't know what he meant. I still don't. I never asked. Some questions are safer left alone. Later, I learned more about him. That he moved cocaine over the border. That he used a lot of it. That he kept a small jar beside his TV with dried up human ears inside. He claimed they belonged to members of some outlaw gang from the Old West, like it was a fun piece of history. A reasonable person would have backed away from someone like that. I did the worst possible thing instead. I borrowed money from him. Not a huge amount. $3,000, but $3,000 from a man like that is $3,000 too much. He was the one who offered it, told me to throw it on whatever I thought would win. If I won, we'd share profits. He seemed to think I was some kind of betting genius. I should have asked what happened if I lost. I lost it all. I told him straight up. No excuses, no dodging. He smiled and said it was fine. He gave me a week to pay him back. A week became a month, then 2. Then I stopped answering his calls. I started scanning every street corner and bar window, reflection like he might be standing behind me. Eventually, he sent other people to do the watching. Now they were at my door. That morning, after the latest pounding and threats, I called him. I apologized for avoiding him and asked him what it would take to square it up. A clean number. A price for peace. 10,000, he said, like it was nothing. And then he told me if I didn't give it to him by Tuesday next week, he'd come himself and blast my door off its hinges. He told me I could run, I could call police, it wouldn't matter. He'd find me. And when he did, he'd skin me alive and toss me into a vat of boiling oil. Maybe the boiling oil part was exaggeration. I don't know. But I believed him about the rest. I told him I understood. I told him to meet me at a bar next Tuesday at noon and that I'd have the money. Then I hung up and sat there shaking. $10,000. Scott's Mall offer was $250 an hour. That meant 40 hours. I had about 170 hours before Tuesday noon. I messaged Scott back and told him I was interested. He responded quickly, like he'd been waiting. He asked when I could start. I said immediately. I asked how many hours he could get me before Tuesday. He said, maybe 35. I pushed for 40. He said 35 was a hard limit, but he could probably bump the rate a little. We went back and forth, me trying to squeeze him for more, even throwing in a fake line about eviction to guilt him into it. Eventually, we agreed on a slightly higher hourly rate. Then he sent me the address and told me the schedule, exactly 2 to 9 the next day. He asked for my name, age, phone number, email. That's it. No ID, no address, nothing you'd expect from any real job. Convenient? Sure. Also, a giant red flag. A few hours later, he emailed me again with reminders. That's what he called them, but it read like warnings. He told me I had to act like a real customer from the moment I stepped inside to the moment I left. If anyone asked what I was doing, I had to answer confidently. Shopping, seeing a movie, grabbing lunch, killing time. He told me not to freeze up, not to act like a deer in headlights. Then he wrote something that made my throat go dry. He told me not to ask any questions while I was in there. If I saw or heard something weird, ignore it. If I ever felt like I was in genuine danger, I could leave and I'd still be paid in full for the day. He also said if any incidents happened, I should tell him exactly what happened because his friend likes to keep tabs on that sort of stuff. He ended with one more request. Keep what I see in there to myself. Don't talk about it too much. And if I do, leave out the specifics. I considered asking him what kind of danger he meant, then I didn't. I didn't want to poke the only lifeline I had. I didn't sleep much. I watched Breaking Bad for the 4th time like it could hypnotize me into calm. I looked up the mall address and saw normal reviews, normal photos, nothing obviously wrong. The only odd part was the location. It was out of the way, not easy to reach, not near anything else. I had just enough money for gas there and back. After that, I would be at 0. If it was a joke, I was also done. At a certain point, those two options start feeling similar. By the time I drove there the next day, I felt oddly calm. Either my brain was protecting itself, or the vodka Red Bull mix I drank in the car was doing what it does. The parking lot was bigger than I expected and about 1/5 full, which was surprising given the location. No other buildings nearby, no neighborhood, just highway on one side and dense forest on the other. 10 minutes outside the city, stuck between an industrial strip and farmland. It made no sense. What kind of customer base had this place been built for? Who decided this was smart? At 10 minutes before 2, I sat in my car and tried not to think. At exactly 2, I went in. At first glance, it looked like a mall. H&M, Foot Locker, Bath and Body Works, Sephora candy shops, toy stores full of cute junk. It wasn't busy, but it wasn't deserted either. Enough movement that you could pretend it was normal. But Scott had already poisoned that normal feeling for me. Because now every person I passed, I couldn't stop wondering, are they a real customer? Or are they here for the same reason I am? Are we all pretending? And if we are, who are we pretending for? I kept my eyes forward and avoided eye contact. I went up to the 2nd floor and started looking for the Starbucks. It took longer than it should have, partly because I kept second-guessing myself, and partly because the place was laid out in a way that felt wrong. Like hallways were longer than they needed to be. Like the corners didn't open up the way they should. I eventually found it tucked away at the end of a long line of dead storefronts. Vacant units with gates pulled down, signs peeled off, dark interiors that seemed to swallow light. Starbucks sat there like a little lit-up checkpoint, almost hidden. Inside, there was a barista and one customer, a guy sitting at a table with a half-eaten sandwich, staring straight ahead at nothing I could identify, not his phone, not a book, not even the barista, just forward blank, like he was waiting for something to happen. The barista was a young woman with short blonde hair, maybe in her 20s. I walked up and tried to smile. She didn't smile back. What caught me off guard wasn't that she was unfriendly. It was the look in her eyes when she saw me. It wasn't annoyance. It was hate. Like I'd done something unforgivable just by showing up. Like she knew exactly what I was. For a second, I forgot what to say. I stumbled through a few useless words until I finally got it out. I'm part of the program. She sighed, rolled her eyes, and asked what I wanted to order. I repeated myself. She shook her head like I was an idiot, leaned forward slightly, and lowered her voice. You're supposed to buy something first, she said. They didn't tell you. I told her no. You're supposed to buy something. Hand me some cash, and I give you the change. She said, still staring at me like she wished she could spit in my face. That's how it works? Get it? I felt lightheaded, like the floor tilted slightly. I ordered a black coffee. I dug through my wallet and found a crumpled $1 bill. I handed it to her. She snatched it, dropped it into the register, and then handed me a stack of crisp $10 bills like it was the most normal thing in the world. 10 of them. $100. I turned to leave, and she called me back. "You forgot something." She made the coffee with slow, heavy movements, like every action cost her. That's when I noticed she had a limp. Not dramatic, just enough to make you wonder how long she'd been walking like that. When she handed me the cup, she glared again, and I was weirdly relieved to step away from her. I took one sip. It tasted burnt and awful, like they'd scraped the bottom of a pot and poured it into a cup. I threw it out and tried to act like it didn't matter. I checked the mall directory and decided to kill time at the Chili's. A couple margaritas sounded like a good way to make the hours pass. Yes, I have problems. I'm aware. Downstairs, I passed an older woman, maybe in her 60s or 70s, and for a moment I almost asked her if she was here for the program. I didn't. Something about the whole place made me feel like asking the wrong question was dangerous. At Chili's, the bar was strangely full. Not the tables, just the bar seats. It was the liveliest place I'd seen so far, and even that lively feeling had a sour edge. A mixed group of people, different ages, different looks, all turned slightly toward me as I walked in. The way they looked at me didn't feel like strangers noticing a newcomer. It felt like I'd walked into a room where everyone already knew I wasn't supposed to be there. I sat at the end of the bar and tried to get the bartender's attention. He was in his early 30s, big beard, skinny tattooed arms. It took him 5 minutes to look at me. He walked over slowly, like he was dragging out the moment, like he didn't want to be near me. "Yeah?" he said. I ordered a margarita and a Budweiser. He stared at me like I'd insulted him, like I'd asked for something perverted instead of two of the most basic drinks on earth. Then he turned away and made the margarita in a way that looked almost spiteful. Tequila dumped into a glass, lime wedge tossed in, Sprite splashed on top so messy it spilled onto the counter. He set it down hard in front of me and walked away. No beer. I didn't push it. I sat there sipping the drink, watching CNN on the TV without absorbing a word. I could feel eyes on me. Every time I looked slightly to the side, someone's gaze snapped away like they'd been caught. When I finished, I wanted another. I tried to get the bartender again, but he ignored me completely. He leaned against the back shelf and took swigs from a Smirnoff bottle like he didn't care who saw. It started to feel personal. It started to make me angry. I raised my voice, something like, "Come on, man, can I get a drink?" There was definitely an edge in it. He still didn't look at me. And then, all at once, nobody was looking at me. It was like the whole bar agreed silently to pretend I didn't exist. "What is wrong with you people?" I said louder. Someone shouted back, "Nothing against you, buddy. There's just too many people in here right now." I asked what that was supposed to mean. "It's 5 o'clock on a Tuesday," the bartender finally said, like he was explaining something obvious to a child. "Think about it. How busy can a Chili's get on a Tuesday at 5? If we don't sell this, nobody gets paid. So quit whining and come back when it's emptier." I didn't understand. I still don't. I left the 10 on the counter and walked out. After that, I wandered the mall in a haze, trying to convince myself it was normal, trying to treat the weird parts like quirks, like maybe I was just paranoid. I ate KFC in the food court. The worker didn't speak, only nodded. When I bit into the chicken, part of it was raw. I chewed around it and swallowed because I didn't want to deal with a confrontation in that place. I went into an Under Armour store and found jackets and shirts that were almost right. close enough that at first you wouldn't notice. But then you looked closer and the labels read something like Andre Armour. Cheap counterfeit stuff, but the quality was weirdly decent. I bought a jacket and a t-shirt. The woman working there was actually pleasant, which made it even more confusing. She seemed like a normal employee in a normal store, not like the rest of them all. When I was down to $20, I went to the movie theater. It was empty except for a woman asleep behind the box office and a guy sweeping. The screen that should have listed showtimes was glitched, flickering like it was broken. I asked the guy what was playing. He shrugged and said it could be anything. I asked how I was supposed to buy a ticket. He said I just needed to put a 10 on the counter at the box office, and then I could go into any theater. He told me not to wake Lindsay because she gets cranky and he didn't want to deal with it. I placed the 10, walked into the closest theater, and watched about 2/3 of the last Avatar movie, the one with the fire. I sat there in the dark trying to feel normal. There was one other person in the theater, seated near the front. They didn't move the entire time, not once, not even after the movie ended. Afterward, I went to the bathroom, used the urinal, splashed cold water on my face, and stared at myself in the mirror like I could find the answer in my own eyes. That's when the stall closest to the wall opened. The door swung inward slowly. No one stepped out. I looked down and saw dirty white sneakers through the gap at the bottom, like someone was standing in there facing the door, just waiting, not using the toilet, not moving. I left the bathroom quickly, checking over my shoulder as if something might follow. Nothing did, but my skin stayed prickled. More strange things happened after that, little moments that piled up like pebbles in a shoe. I passed an electronics store, and an older, short guy popped up with a huge smile, gesturing me inside. Cell phone, he said over and over. Fix cell phone. I told him my phone didn't need fixing. His smile dropped instantly, like someone turned off a switch. He walked backward into the store, pulled down the security gate, and the lights inside shut off. He disappeared behind the metal like he'd never existed. Later, I saw a woman walking with a metal tray offering cinnamon roll samples. It was thick gray sludge, bubbling gently like it was hot. It smelled wrong. Not rotten exactly, more like chemicals trying to pretend they were sweet. I said no and kept walking. At some point, I think I had a panic attack. I'd never had one before, but I don't know what else to call it. Tight chest, buzzing hands, the feeling that something terrible was about to happen even though nothing was happening. I sat on a bench and pulled up breathing exercises on YouTube. I followed them. Somehow it helped, enough to keep me from losing it in public. I went back to the food court and spent my last $10 on a huge peanut butter milkshake from Baskin-Robbins with chocolate mixed into it. A stupid sugar bomb that made me feel temporarily human. By then, it was after 8, and I sat there sipping the last of it, waiting for 9 so I could leave. I told myself I just had to make it to 9. I started feeling almost okay, like maybe I could do this again if I had to. Then a guy walked toward me and sat down beside me. He was young, early 20s, tall and skinny, brown hair and a short fade. He looked normal in a way that almost hurt, like he belonged in a campus coffee shop, not here. He started chatting like we were friends, asked how my day was, if the milkshake was any good, the usual small talk. At first, I ignored him. Then guilt got the better of me. He seemed polite, coherent, human. So I answered. He told me his name was Daniel. He said he used to be a copywriter but got laid off 6 months ago and couldn't find work. That's why he was here. Then he asked why I was here. For some reason, I told him the truth. All of it. The gambling, the debt, the collectors, Renzo. It felt good to confess to someone who didn't know me, someone who couldn't call my family, someone who wasn't going to look at me with that mix of pity and disgust. I just kept talking. And then I looked down at his shoes, dirty white sneakers, the same kind I'd seen in the bathroom stall. I felt cold all over. I remembered Scott's instructions about what to say if someone asked what I was doing here. I remembered the part about acting like a customer. And suddenly I understood that Daniel wasn't making small talk. He was testing me. I stood up too fast and told him I had to go. He protested immediately, said I should stay because he wanted to show me something. I said I was tired and needed to go home. He grinned, and the grin didn't fit his face. His teeth looked too square, too even, like cheap tiles. His lips stretched wider than they should, then wider again, as if the skin didn't have the same limits mine does. It wasn't a full monster transformation, or anything dramatic. It was subtle enough to make your brain argue with itself while your body screams to run. He asked again why I was there. Shopping, I said, forcing the word out. He tilted his head. Shopping, he repeated, like he was tasting it. He pointed out I didn't have any bags. What was I shopping for? I looked around, confused for half a second, and remembered I'd left the Under Armour bag in the bathroom. That stupid little detail felt like a trap snapping shut. He laughed, friendly on the surface, something sharp underneath. You're not here to shop, he said. So why are you here? I said I really had to leave and started walking toward the exit. His footsteps matched mine immediately, staying close, not rushing like he knew I couldn't do anything about it. At the doors I checked again. 8:55. I turned around. He stopped about 6 feet away, still smiling. Don't you have to go home? He asked. Door's right there. Why don't you leave? He already knew the answer. That's what made it so bad. He wanted to hear me say it. I started checking my phone every few seconds, not even trying to hide it now. He laughed again and told me that if I wasn't going home, I might as well come see what he wanted to show me. My panic came back hard. I could feel it in my throat, my hands. But I also knew I couldn't leave early. I didn't know how they'd know, but I believed Scott when he said they would. And I needed the money. I needed it like air. I forced myself to stand there for those last minutes, my mind screaming at me to bolt. My eyes stuck on the numbers on my phone as if staring could make time move faster. Daniel kept talking, kept pushing. Each request sounded more like a threat than the last. His grin slowly faded into something meaner, like he was tired of pretending. The moment my phone clock rolled to 9 o'clock, I moved. I tried to bolt out the doors. I didn't get far. His hand clamped onto my collar and yanked me back like I weighed nothing. His grip was wrong, too strong, too sure, like his fingers were hooks. I fought, twisting and jerking away, and the only reason I got free is because I was wearing an old cheap shirt with weak fabric. It tore. It ripped right off my back and my hands. I lunged forward, shoved the door open, and threw myself out into the parking lot. I hit the concrete hard. Pain shot up both arms, and I think something in my elbow cracked. I didn't care. I scrambled up and spun around, bracing for him to come charging out. He didn't. He stayed inside. His face pressed against the glass, smashed flat, features distorted into something ugly and wrong. His eyes were wide and bulging, and he dragged his tongue across the glass in slow circles like an animal. Like he'd forgotten, all at once, what humans are supposed to do with their mouths. I stood there, frozen, convinced that if I moved, he would move too. After what felt like forever, he finally pulled his face off the glass, turned, and walked away like it meant nothing. My legs went weak. I doubled over and threw up bile onto the asphalt. My heart wouldn't slow down. The sky was turning orange as the sun dropped, and I stood there cold and shaking, half shirtless, in a parking lot that suddenly felt enormous. That's when I noticed my car. All 4 tires were slashed. Every single one. My stomach dropped again when I looked around and realized my car was the only one left in the entire lot. No other vehicles, no people, no movement. Just the building behind me, silent and looming, and the forest beyond the lights. I tried calling an Uber, but the signal was so bad the app wouldn't load. I thought about going back inside to use the mall Wi-Fi and immediately felt sick. There was no chance I was stepping back through those doors. My apartment was about 18 miles away, technically walkable, but I didn't know the route well enough. In the dark, I'd probably end up lost, maybe in the next town over, maybe in the woods. And the idea of walking alone with that mall behind me made my skin crawl. I leaned on my hood, numb, thinking I might actually die out there over a stupid debt and a stupid addiction. Then the front doors opened again. A woman stepped out, 30s, jeans, and a windbreaker. She didn't look like Daniel. She didn't look like any of the hostile faces from the bar. Still, I backed away because I didn't trust my own judgment anymore. She walked halfway into the lot and stopped like she had an invisible line she didn't want to cross. She looked at me, looked away, then looked back like she was weighing something. Then she called out and asked if I needed a ride. I told her yes, but asked how she could prove she wasn't with the maniac I'd just escaped. She said she wasn't with him, and she didn't know how she was supposed to prove that. She said she wasn't waiting around, so if I wanted a ride, I needed to decide quickly. It was getting colder, and she never once asked why I was shirtless. That detail somehow convinced me more than anything else, like she'd seen worse. I asked where her car was. She told me to follow her, and before she turned, she lifted her windbreaker slightly to show the Glock on her hip. She said she didn't think I was a threat, but she would shoot me if I tried anything. I told her I wouldn't. Her car was parked about half a mile away, hidden off the road on a dirt patch in the trees. I asked why she parked so far. She said the first time she'd left her car on the lot after 8 p.m., her tires got slashed. That hit me like a weight. I asked how long she'd been doing this. Working the mall? Whatever this was. She said she didn't want to talk about it. She said she'd prefer silence the whole ride. So we rode in silence. When we got back into the city, she dropped me at a train station. I didn't have cash for a ticket, but it was close enough to my apartment that I could walk it in 10 minutes. I thanked her. Before she drove off, I asked her. She shook her head and said it would be pointless for me to know. When I got home, I drank the last of the vodka in my fridge and passed out on the couch. This morning I woke up with my mouth tasting like metal and my whole body sore. My elbows hurt like fire when I moved them. Then I checked my phone and saw a bank notification. I'd been e-transferred $3,000, 7 hours, $3,000, like clockwork. There was also an email from Scott. He said he heard I might have had a rough first day, so he sent extra on top of what was promised. He said my hours were the same today, 2 to 9, and he reminded me again, like a warning, to act like a customer. It's around 10:30 a.m. as I write this. I'm lying on my couch drinking Clamato juice, staring at the ceiling like it might give me advice. I tried calculating how far $3,000 would get me if I skipped town. Not far. Not far at all, especially with the kind of people looking for me. Then I tried thinking of any way to get the other $7,000 before Tuesday. Anything that wasn't this. And I keep coming back to the same conclusion, the same ugly truth. I don't want to go back to that place, but I'm pretty sure I have to. Story 5. I've always been a casual kind of reader, the type of guy who needs real books nearby, stacked on a desk or spread open on a table, so I can read a little and scribble a little, maybe sketch something in the margins. I don't read like I'm chasing a prize or trying to prove something. I read because I'm trying to find one perfect book that fits me the way a good pair of shoes fits. Something that feels natural. Something that doesn't fight me. For years, I kept thinking that book had to be out there somewhere, waiting on a shelf like it was meant for me. And in a weird way, that made my search feel almost like a treasure hunt. Except I wasn't hunting for gold or old coins. I was hunting for comfort. For a story that would sit in my hands and feel right. Ironically, finding it turned out to be harder, uglier, and more twisted than any treasure hunt I'd ever heard about. I'd been in and out of small libraries and roadside bookstalls for months. I drove out to places people swore by, the ones that were supposed to be famous, the kind that showed up in travel blogs with warm lighting and handwritten signs. I flipped through classics. I tried modern fiction. I gave poetry another chance. I even forced myself through a few romance novels because friends kept telling me I just hadn't found the right one. None of it landed. Some books felt too sweet, like they were trying too hard to be liked. Some felt too clever, like they were written to impress other writers instead of real readers. Others were fine, technically, but they left me cold. It was always the same pattern. I'd get excited, buy the book or borrow it, bring it home, and then feel that quiet disappointment after a few chapters when I realized it wasn't for me. At some point, I started to feel embarrassed about how picky I was. I wasn't some expert. I wasn't an academic. I was just a guy who wanted to read and enjoy it. Still, I kept going because the urge didn't stop. If anything, it grew. Then I heard about Great Expectations. It wasn't like I'd never heard the title before. Everyone has. But I kept running into people who talked about it like it was a diamond, like it was proof that books could be serious and beautiful at the same time. A must-read, a masterpiece, the kind of book people mention when they want to sound sure of themselves. I didn't feel that pull toward it, not naturally. Something about the way it was praised made me skeptical. But after so many failed attempts, I thought maybe I should stop resisting. Maybe I needed to take the obvious road for once. I live in the countryside, far enough out that the world feels quieter and older. The land around my house is strange. The soil is brittle and the ground stays cold. Even during warmer months, the house itself is old enough to have its own moods. It creaks when the wind changes. It settles in the night like it's breathing. There's one thing about the place that always makes visitors laugh until they realize I'm serious. I don't use the left bathroom. It isn't superstition. It's the foundation. The ground under that side of the house is weak. Too much water, too much weight in the wrong place, and it could cause the floor to shift. A neighbor once told me a story about an older home nearby that partially collapsed after a pipe leak. I believed him. I've heard the subtle groan of old beams and felt the way the floor responds when you step too hard in the wrong spot. So I keep that bathroom closed. I treat it like it's not there. I'm also a member of a local community group called Cornyn. It's one of those rural organizations that exists half for practical reasons and half because people like belonging to something. Cornyn owned a small old library that most people seem to forget about. It wasn't in a lively part of town, and it wasn't advertised. It sat quietly like an abandoned church, full of shelves and shadows. People said it held hundreds, maybe thousands of valuable old books, the kind that smelled like dust and time. the kind collectors talk about with reverence, but almost no one visited, not because it was forbidden, but because nobody had a reason to. The place had a reputation for being dead quiet and strangely untouched, like it was waiting for an audience that never came. One afternoon, I needed to go there to pick up something related to the community, and I decided I'd use the chance to look for the book I'd been chasing. If there was anywhere in town that might hold the right copy of Great Expectations, it would be a library like that, a place with forgotten shelves. The moment I walked in, I felt it, a thick stillness, like the air had been sealed in a jar. The building smelled of paper and old wood. The light was dimmer than it should have been, even though it was daytime outside. Dust sat on the tops of shelves like snow that never melted. And then I saw her. A chubby woman in her 50s stood behind the counter, wearing clothes that looked strangely old-fashioned, like she'd dressed from a different decade on purpose. Something about her posture made her seem heavier than she was, like a walking boulder. She wasn't reading or organizing or doing anything that suggested she'd been busy. She was just there, waiting. At first, I didn't pay her much attention. Rural libraries often have volunteers, and volunteers often look eccentric. But when she walked toward me, I noticed details that made my skin prickle. Her scent was fine, not unpleasant, almost clean, but her hair was thin and scrambled, like it had been brushed in a rush and then forgotten. She wore a wide band across her head that didn't suit her, and her name tag was pinned at an odd angle. It read, Chatley, not Charlie, not Charlie. She stopped in front of me and asked in a calm voice what book I was looking for. I told her, Great Expectations. She didn't blink. She didn't ask for the author's name. She didn't ask if I meant a specific edition. She just turned and walked away like she already knew exactly where it was. As she moved between the shelves, the weather outside seemed to shift. I know how that sounds, but it's the only way I can explain it. The air inside the library felt heavier, more humid, like a storm had crept up to the windows, and her footsteps, this is the part that stuck with me, somehow lined up with a low buzzing sound like distant lightning humming in the clouds. She reached into a shelf and pulled out a book without searching. No hesitation, no scanning spines, just a simple motion, like she'd rehearsed it. She handed it to me. Her face looked dull and flat, like she was annoyed at me for wanting it. Then she smiled, but the smile didn't lift her eyes. Her lips were dry and cracked, and when she spoke, her voice had a strange softness to it. Great Expectations, she said. You hadn't better choice, dear. The books have been untouched for years. Read it, my sweetheart. This won't make you smile, as it didn't make me. I stared at her for a second, trying to decide if she was joking. Something about the way she said sweetheart felt wrong, like she didn't mean it kindly. I gave a small, awkward nod, took the book, and left. Walking out, I kept thinking the same thing. Something is off. At home, I tried to reset myself. I took a shower, put on clean clothes, and made a small ritual out of it, the way I do when I want to enjoy reading. I cleared a space on the table, set the book down carefully, and sat in my chair with real excitement. I told myself I was finally going to take a new path. I was sick of books that felt too romantic or too sugary, books that left me irritated instead of satisfied. Today was going to be different. I opened the book and started reading. The first few pages seemed normal enough. The paper felt old under my fingers. The print looked slightly uneven, like an older press. I read slowly, letting myself settle in. But then something shifted. It wasn't a single obvious moment, like a jump scare. It was more like a gradual wrongness that crept in between sentences. a sense that the words weren't landing where they should. The tone wasn't what I expected. The story didn't feel like Dickens. I can't even say I knew Dickens well at that point, but I knew enough to know this wasn't the book people raved about. As I kept turning pages, my body reacted in a way I didn't understand. My chest felt tight. My heart felt weaker, like it was sinking instead of pumping. My hands got clammy. I told myself I was being dramatic, that I had just worked myself up with expectations. But the discomfort grew. I finally closed the book and realized my collar was damp with sweat. The room was quiet, but my head was loud, repeating one thought over and over. What the hell did I just read? It wasn't Great Expectations, not remotely. It read like a Japanese horror story, like something designed to crawl under your skin and stay there. The outside world didn't match the mood it created. It was a regular day, but the book made my living room feel darker, like the corners of the house were deeper than they'd been an hour ago. I flipped to the cover and the last pages, looking for some label, some prank, some sign that the book had been misfiled or switched. Nothing. No explanation, no helpful stamp. Just the title and the heavy feeling in my stomach. I drove back to the library with the book in my lap like it was something dirty. When I walked in, the woman was still there. She looked at me and smiled wider than before, as if she'd been waiting for me to return. I placed the book on the counter and told her it wasn't the right one. As I turned to leave, she stopped me. "Didn't you believe me, son?" she said, almost amused. "I told you this book wasn't meant for you." I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. Then she continued, "But I have a solid one that will help you out." Before I could refuse, she turned and reached for another book. This one was older looking, dusty, and heavier in my hands when she gave it to me. She made a strange little sound, almost like an ah, and smiled in a way that made my skin tighten. I forced myself to smile back. I told myself I was being unfair. I told myself not to judge a book by its cover, because that's what people always say, and I've been trying to be more open-minded. I left with the second book. By the time I got home, the sky had changed. Clouds had thickened and darkened, stacking on top of one another like bruises. The air looked heavy, and the trees around my house barely moved, as if they were holding still. I sat down anyway and opened the book. Within minutes, I realized it was horror again. The language, the pacing, the way it hinted at awful things without showing them right away. I felt annoyed, but I also felt oddly hooked. Maybe I thought, I can handle it this time. Maybe the first book had just caught me off guard. Maybe I'd even learned to enjoy a darker story if it was written well. The first chapters pulled me in, and then it got worse. Not in the fun, fictional way, in the way that makes you wish you hadn't read the sentence because now the image is in your mind forever. The story turned into a paranormal nightmare, something soaked in dread. I kept telling myself I'd stop at the next page, then the next, then the next, like the book had tied a string around my wrist. I turned pages until I reached page 142. That's where I stopped, because I felt like it couldn't possibly get worse than what I'd just read. The concept was clever, I'll give it that, but it was absolutely not meant for me. In the story, there was a girl living in a mansion with her father. The house was plagued by strange events, sounds in empty rooms, shadows where they shouldn't be, the feeling of being watched by something that didn't have a face. The father began acting wrong, not just moody or stressed, but truly strange, like he was becoming less human every day. It described him standing under boiling water for hours, not screaming, not trying to escape, just staying there as if the pain was a ritual he couldn't stop. The words didn't rush through it. they lingered. The scene ended with him melting like wax, his shape collapsing, his skin and body sliding away, while the water kept pouring. The daughter ran. She escaped the mansion and disappeared into the night, and my mind started bracing itself for the next part, for the explanation, for the ending that would make it all feel contained. But when I turned the page, it was blank. Not just one blank page, several, like the story had been cut off mid-breath. I flipped back and forth, thinking maybe pages had stuck together or been printed wrong. But no, the book simply stopped. Angry and shaken, I cursed myself for wasting my time and letting myself get dragged into it. I decided I'd return it first thing and never step foot in that library again. On impulse, I packed up a slice of pie, too, the way you bring a small peace offering when you know you're about to be rude. It was ridiculous, but at the time, I wanted to feel like I was handling the situation like a normal adult. Before I closed the book for good, I looked at the last page. There, in messy handwriting, someone had written, "Charles Dickens was a fraud. Chatley Williams, 1865. I stared at it for a long time. The date didn't make sense. The name didn't make sense. The handwriting looked old. But anyone could fake that, I told myself. People forged things. People played pranks. People did weird stuff in small towns when they were bored. Still, my hands shook a little when I tossed the book onto the table. That's when a sudden wind pushed through the room and scraped one of the chairs across the floor. The sound was sharp, like a warning. I jumped, then got up fast and checked the window. It had been open a crack. I shut it and locked it, annoyed at myself for reacting so strongly. I sat down to eat dinner and tried to pull my mind away from the book. I told myself I was safe in my own house and my own quiet life. It was just paper and ink. It was just a story. Then someone knocked on my door. Not a casual tap, a firm knock, slow and clear, like whoever was outside wanted to be let in. I assumed it was the neighbor's gardener. He sometimes came by to ask for extra bags when the weather turned and the wind dumped leaves everywhere. With the storm clouds building, it seemed reasonable. I opened the door. A little girl stood on my porch in the dull evening light. The sky behind her looked sickly, gray, and heavy. Her clothes were dirty, like she'd fallen more than once. Her face was pale, and there was something bitter in her expression that didn't look like a child's normal fear. She looked exhausted, as if she'd been running for a long time. "I don't want to go home," she muttered. Her voice was small, but it carried weight, like she'd been saying that sentence for hours. Every instinct in me said I should call someone right away. But she was a child, alone on a rural road with a storm coming. I stepped aside and let her in. I guided her to a chair and offered her water. She sat down like her bones were too tired to hold her up. I picked up my phone and tried dialing for help. No connection. I tried again, more forcefully, like pressing the buttons harder would make a difference. Still nothing. The screen showed no signal at all, which was unusual. My house had bad reception sometimes, but not like that. The room felt colder than it should have. The storm hadn't even hit yet, but the air inside had dropped like the house had opened its mouth and swallowed warmth. I went to the fireplace and turned the flames up in the chimney, careful to keep them controlled. The familiar crackle helped my nerves a little. As I poured tea, I asked her where she lived. At first, she didn't answer. She stared down at her hands like she was trying to decide if she could trust me with the truth. Then she spoke, quietly. "I'm from a mansion," she said. The word mansion sounded wrong in her mouth, too old-fashioned, like she'd learned it from a book. Then she leaned forward close enough that I could smell sweat and cold air on her skin, and whispered, My father is dead. He died during a shower. He had been acting strange for a few weeks, and then he melted away while showering. My throat tightened. I pulled my chair back so quickly it scraped the floor. My heart jumped hard and fast, and for a second I felt like there wasn't enough air in the room. My mind tried to line up what she was saying with what I'd read, and it refused to fit, like trying to force two pieces together that were never meant to meet. I turned, half expecting to see something behind me, something tall and wet and wrong in the hallway. But the girl just sat there crying silently, her shoulders shaking. I didn't know what to do. I felt trapped between instincts. Help the child, protect yourself, run, pray, do something. My hands moved without much thought. I went and shut the door to the room, as if a closed door could keep out whatever had followed her in. When I turned back, the book on the table was flipping through its own pages. Not from wind. The window was shut. The air was still. The pages lifted and fell with purpose, as if an invisible hand was searching. It stopped at page 142, the blank page. My stomach dropped. "What now?" I said out loud, and my voice sounded too high, too thin. The door behind me shoved open so hard it hit my shoulder and forced me into the hall. I stumbled and caught myself on the wall, blinking fast, trying to understand how a closed door had just moved like that. The girl was standing in the hallway now. I hadn't heard her get up. I hadn't seen her pass me. She stood with her arm extended, pointing toward the left side of the house, toward the bathroom I never used. "My father is right there," she said in a low, sobbing voice. "Bathing." My feet felt the change before my eyes confirmed it. Warmth crept across the floorboards, spreading like a fever. Heat rose through the soles of my shoes, and I remembered what I'd always said about that bathroom, how water weakens the ground, how the house could collapse. From the direction of the bathroom, I heard the sound of water, not a drip, a steady leak growing louder. I rushed toward it, and as I got closer, I felt the air thicken with steam. Boiling hot water was pouring out from under the bathroom door, flooding into the hall in a fast shimmering sheet. The walls around the door looked damp, and thin cracks were already crawling outward like veins. My mind went blank in the way it does when something is too impossible to accept. All I could think was, the house is going to come down. I slammed my hands against the bathroom door, shouting without meaning to. I tried the handle. It wouldn't move. Water kept pushing out, hot enough that the steam stung my face. Somewhere inside, behind the door, I heard a man's voice. A low growl that didn't sound fully human. The water reached my ankles, then higher, spreading into the hall like it had a mind of its own. Panic took over. And in that panic, I did the only thing I could think of that felt connected to all of this. I ran back to the table, grabbed the book, and slammed it shut as hard as I could. The moment the covers hit, the noise in the hall changed. The pressure of the water paused like the flow had hesitated. I didn't stop to analyze it. I grabbed the book with both hands and carried it to the small home shrine I kept in the corner of the living room. I'm not overly religious, but I was raised with faith, and I still kept a statue of Jesus there, more out of comfort than routine. In that moment, comfort wasn't enough. I wanted protection. I wanted something stronger than me in the room. I placed the book at the base of the statue and backed away, breathing hard, listening to the house creak. Footsteps sounded behind me, slow, wet footsteps. I turned, and a human shape stood there in the dim light, half hidden by shadow. As it stepped closer, I saw its face, or what was left of it. Part of it looked melted, as if heat had softened the flesh and pulled it out of shape. One eye bulged too far, glossy and alive in a way that made my stomach flip. Before I could move, it grabbed my throat. Its grip was unbelievably strong. Fingers dug into my skin, cutting off air. The smell coming off it was hot water and something sour underneath, like wet metal. It leaned close and yelled in a voice that vibrated through my bones. I was bathing, and you didn't let me. I clawed at its hand, choking, my vision narrowing at the edges. The room tilted. I thought, in a strange, calm moment, that I was going to die in my own living room because of a book I didn't even want. Then the statue of Jesus began to moan. Not a crack or a shift of material. A moan, like something alive was in there and suffering. The tighter the thing's grip became, the louder the moaning grew, as if the statue was sharing my pain or reacting to it. The sound filled the room, low and horrible, and for a split second I wasn't sure which was worse, the hand on my throat or the idea that the statue was not a statue at all. And then the figure vanished. No fade, no slow retreat. It was simply gone, swallowed by the darkness like it had never stood there. I collapsed onto the floor, coughing so hard my chest hurt. My throat burned where it had been squeezed. The house fell quiet again, the kind of quiet that rings in your ears. The Jesus statue went silent too. Shaking, I forced myself to stand. I reached out and touched the statue with the tips of my fingers, as if I needed proof it was solid. The surface was cool, but beneath that coolness, I felt something else. A heartbeat, steady, slow, and sinking with mine. I jerked my hand back, and the moment I did, my legs gave out. The room spun, and everything went black. When I woke up, morning light was coming through the windows as if nothing had happened. Birds sounded normal outside. The storm clouds were gone. The hall was dry. No steam, no flooding, no cracks spreading fresh across the walls. I lay there for a long time, trying to decide if I'd dreamed it. But my throat hurt. My neck was bruised. My body felt like it had been through something real. And worse than that, I had the sense that something had gotten into me. Not possession the way movies show it, with instant madness and voices. Something quieter, something like an infection or a stain. The feeling didn't leave when I stood up or washed my face. It stayed in the background, like an extra presence inside my skin. I fought it in the only way I knew how. I kept myself busy. I made coffee, I opened windows, I forced my hands to do normal tasks until my mind followed. Eventually, the house felt silent again, but not clean, not truly safe. I took the book, wrapped it in a cloth like it was fragile or dangerous, and drove back to the Cornyn Library. This time, the woman wasn't there. Behind the counter stood a man talking quietly to another person. They looked normal in a way that made my anger flare, because normal didn't belong in my last 24 hours. I marched up and slapped the book onto the counter harder than I meant to. My voice shook as I spoke. Where is that old filthy woman that... I cut myself off because the words sounded stupid in my mouth, like I was about to accuse them of something they couldn't possibly understand. The librarian stared at me, confused. Woman, he said. We've never hired a woman here. I felt my face heat up. She was here yesterday, I insisted. And the day before, she gave me this book. The man frowned and shook his head. We were closed yesterday afternoon, and the day before as well. I tried to argue, I tried to push past his calm tone and force him to admit I wasn't crazy. But the more I spoke, the more I realized how insane it sounded. A strange woman in outdated clothes,